Athol Fugard, passed away at the age of 91, leaving behind a remarkable legacy as one of the most influential playwrights in modern history. A fearless voice against apartheid, Fugard used his plays to expose the injustices of South Africa's brutal system of racial segregation. His work transcended borders, speaking to universal themes of human dignity, resistance, and the complexities of personal and political struggle. His name will forever be remembered in the world of literature and theater for his unwavering dedication to truth and justice. Born on June 11, 1932, in Middelburg, South Africa, Fugard grew up in a racially divided society that deeply influenced his worldview. His mother was an English-speaking Afrikaner who ran a boarding house, while his father, of British descent, was disabled and struggled with alcoholism. These early experiences of hardship, division, and resilience shaped the themes he would later explore in his works. Fugard's love for storytelling emerged during his university years at the University of Cape Town, though he left before completing his degree. He traveled extensively and worked on a cargo ship, experiences that broadened his perspective on oppression and human suffering. Upon returning to South Africa, he found work as a stage manager and actor, but his true calling was in writing. He soon began crafting plays that addressed the racial injustices he witnessed firsthand. His breakout play, The Blood Knot, 1961, told the story of two mixed-race brothers navigating the apartheid system. The play was groundbreaking in its raw and unfiltered portrayal of racial identity and systemic discrimination. South African authorities, recognizing its powerful message, banned the play, marking the beginning of Fugard's long battle with government censorship. This, however, did not deter him. If anything, it strengthened his resolve. Fugard continued to write and produce plays that challenged the apartheid regime. Works such as Sizwe Banzi is Dead, 1972, The Island, 1973, and Master Harold, and The Boys, 1982, solidified his reputation as a playwright of immense courage and insight. His plays were often co-created with black actors, including John Connie and Winston Chona, breaking the racial barriers imposed by the government. His commitment to truth-telling in an era of repression made him a target of state scrutiny, yet he persisted, using the stage as his battleground against tyranny. His influence extended beyond South Africa. His works were performed globally, earning critical acclaim and multiple awards. He was honored with a Tony Award for Lifetime Achievement in Theatre in 2011, a testament to his far-reaching impact. His writing also inspired a new generation of playwrights who saw theater as a tool for social change. Even after the fall of apartheid, Fugard continued to write, exploring themes of memory, reconciliation, and personal redemption. His later works, such as The Train Driver, 2010, and The Shadow of the Hummingbird, 2014, reflected on South Africa's transition from oppression to democracy, capturing both the triumphs and the lingering wounds of the past. Beyond his plays, Fugard's legacy is etched in his mentorship and dedication to fostering new talent. He worked tirelessly to support young writers, believing in the power of storytelling to change the world. His impact is not only felt in theaters but also in classrooms, where his works continue to be studied and performed. Athol Fugard's passing marks the end of an era, but his words will live on. His plays remain as relevant today as they were decades ago, reminding us of the power of art in the face of injustice. He was not just a playwright. He was a warrior for truth, a voice for the oppressed, and a beacon of hope for those who dare to speak out. Rest in peace, Athol Fugard. Your legacy will never fade. Lynne Marie Stewart passed away at the age of 21. Lynne Marie Stewart left behind a legacy of laughter, chaos, and unforgettable characters that far outlived her brief fictional life. Most fans remember her best as Miss Yvonne, the self-proclaimed most beautiful woman in Puppetland, from Pee-wee's Playhouse. With her big hair, exaggerated expressions, and absolute command over the room, Lynne didn't just play characters, she became them. Behind the scenes, Lynne wasn't anything like the over-the-top personas she portrayed. Friends described her as incredibly grounded, warm-hearted, and just a little shy. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, showed up to rehearsal early, and always brought extra snacks, just in case someone forgot to eat. But put a script in her hand and a camera in front of her? A different creature entirely. Long before she became a cult comedy icon, Lynne was a theater kid with a fierce dedication to improv. She studied alongside some of the biggest names in the business at the Groundlings. Yes, that Groundlings. the legendary Los Angeles comedy troupe that gave us the likes of Phil Hartman, Kristen Wiig, and Will Ferrell. But even among comedy giants, Lynne stood out. People said she could deliver a line so seriously, so sincerely, that it took audiences a full 2 seconds to realize she was being absolutely ridiculous. And by then, they were already doubled over laughing. That was her secret weapon. She never tried to be funny, she just was. The role of Miss Yvonne wasn't just handed to her. Lynne built that character from scratch, pulling together pieces from Southern belles, old Hollywood actresses, and a bit of her own lovable weirdness. And once she stepped into that poofy pink dress, it was showtime. Kids loved her, adults secretly adored her, and every time she strutted on screen, you knew something ridiculous was about to happen. But Lynne wasn't a one-role wonder. She popped up in everything from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia to Night Court, slipping into roles like a comedic chameleon. She had a face you'd recognize, even if you couldn't quite place it. Hey, isn't that kind of actress? And that's exactly how she liked it, blending in just enough to surprise you every time. Off-screen, she was a quiet champion for young women in comedy, especially those who didn't fit the typical mold. She once told a struggling actress, "If they're laughing at you, make sure it's because you wanted them to." Classic Lynne, soft encouragement, hidden in a punchline, and though she never chased the spotlight, it found her anyway, especially at fan conventions, where grown adults would show up dressed as Miss Yvonne, quoting lines from a show they hadn't seen since the 80s. Lynne would just laugh and say, "You remember that? I don't even remember that." She never made headlines for scandals, never tried to go viral. She simply did the work, stayed true to herself, and made people laugh harder than they expected to. And that's how you become unforgettable. Norm Clarke passed away at the age of 21. Norm Clarke didn't live long enough to retire, but he did live long enough to become a legend of Las Vegas, of celebrity journalism, and of bold-faced names you were never supposed to know. He wasn't just a columnist. Norm was the man with the eye patch and the inside scoop, the one who always knew who was doing what, where, and with whom, usually before the PR teams even knew. For over a decade, Norm Clarke's Vegas Confidential column was the unfiltered, unshakable pulse of Sin City. And when I say he saw everything, I mean it literally. That eye patch? Yeah, Norm only needed one eye to catch what others missed. Before he became Las Vegas' most trusted gossip detective, Norm was an old-school newsman. Born in North Dakota, he worked his way up the journalism ranks, chasing stories the hard way, knocking on doors, pounding pavement, and asking the questions everyone else avoided. He covered hard news, plane crashes, sports scandals, politics. The guy could write an obituary that'd make you cry and then flip to write about celebrity sightings that made you laugh. But when he landed in Vegas, that's when Norm Clarke became Norm Clarke. Las Vegas was exploding in the early 2000s. Celebrities, scandals, million-dollar bets, Elvis impersonators marrying Britney Spears lookalikes at 3 a.m. Norm saw it all, and he wrote it all. If there was a party, he was there. If a celeb was trying to sneak out the back door, Norm was already out front waiting with a notepad and a grin. He never needed to embellish. Vegas wrote itself. He just knew where to look. What made Norm different from the usual gossip columnists was how he reported. He didn't dig in the dirt. He danced around it, with style. He never punched down, never took cheap shots. He was cheeky, not cruel. Even when the stories were juicy, he kept the tone playful. Vegas could be wild, but Norm made it fun. People wanted to be in Norm's column. To be quoted by him was a badge of honor. He once said, "I don't do gotcha journalism, I do Tata journalism." That line alone tells you everything about his vibe. Norm's signature eye patch, by the way? That wasn't for show. He lost sight in one eye due to a rare eye disease, but instead of hiding it, he made it part of his brand. It became iconic. People at parties would ask, "Is Norm here?" And someone would say, "If the patch is in the room, the truth's coming out." He was more than a writer. He was a walking institution. Even after retiring from full-time work, Norm kept the stories flowing on his website and social media. He never missed a beat. He still knew where the real action was, even when the headlines stopped chasing it. But the most surprising thing? Norm was deeply humble. He wasn't flashy, didn't roll with an entourage or demand VIP access. He just loved stories, loved people, and had this uncanny ability to remember names, faces, and weird facts that made everyone feel seen. When he passed, Vegas dimmed just a little. The Strip felt quieter. The whispers in the back rooms didn't feel quite as fun, because Norm Clarke wasn't just chronicling the chaos, he gave it charm. Mark Dobies passed away at the age of 21. Mark Dobies was the kind of actor who never craved the spotlight, but when it found him, he wore it with quiet intensity. For daytime soap fans, his face was unforgettable. He wasn't just another pretty guy in a suit crying under soft lighting. He brought gravity, charm, and a certain realness to roles that could have easily been over the top. Most remember Mark as the brooding Noah Chase on One Life to Live, or as the complicated Daniel Coulson on Guiding Light. And while those might have been just soap roles, to some people, anyone who watched daytime TV in the early 2000s knew Mark Dobies could act circles around most of Hollywood. But acting wasn't always his plan. Mark didn't come up through drama schools or chase auditions from childhood. He graduated from Penn State with a degree in marketing, originally thinking he'd go into the business world. Acting was something he stumbled into, almost by accident. He signed with a modeling agency first, did a few commercials, and someone said, "You've got the look, but more importantly you've got the presence." That one sentence changed everything. Mark took classes, trained hard, and when his shot came, he didn't just take it, he earned it. In soap operas, filming schedules are brutal. You get 1 or 2 takes max. You have to memorize entire pages of dialogue every day. Most people burn out quickly, but Mark was different. He approached every scene like it mattered, no matter how dramatic the plot was. Whether he was uncovering a secret twin, surviving a boat explosion, or getting slapped in a courtroom, Mark made it believable. Off camera, he was nothing like the intense characters he played. Friends and co-stars described him as laid-back, funny, and insanely generous. He was the guy who'd bring coffee for the whole set, help new cast members run lines, and stay late even if he wasn't in the final scene. He didn't do it for clout. He just cared about the craft. He was also a bit of a mystery. He didn't chase fame, didn't do many interviews, and didn't plaster his life all over social media. He kept things quiet, focused, grounded, and honestly, that made people respect him even more. After stepping away from the soap world, Mark moved toward indie films and stage work. He loved the intimacy of theater, the direct connection with an audience. He once said in a rare interview, "TV moves fast, but stage lets you breathe. I like that. I like when the silence means something." But no matter what he did, fans always remembered him from those iconic roles. At fan conventions, people would show up with old VHS tapes and dog-eared magazines, gushing about the impact his performances had on them. Some would say, "You helped me through a really dark time." And Mark? He'd just smile and say thank you, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. When news of his passing spread, tributes poured in not just from fans, but from fellow actors, people who had shared scenes, dressing rooms, and years of early morning call times. They talked about his kindness, his discipline, his quiet strength. He once said in a rare interview, "If a song makes someone feel less alone, I've done my job." That's all I ever wanted. Even after Sad Eyes faded from radio rotations, it never really disappeared. The song found its way into films, late-night playlists, breakup mixtapes, and dimly lit karaoke bars where someone always picked it just to feel something real again. Robert John didn't chase another hit. He went back to what he loved, writing. He recorded a few more albums, did background work, and mentored younger artists who had more ambition than direction. He wasn't interested in reinventing himself. He just wanted to create. He turned down multiple offers to modernize Sad Eyes with remixes or duets. When asked why, he said, "It's not meant to be louder, it's meant to hurt." When he passed, tributes came quietly, just like the man himself. Artists from every genre posted the same song in his memory. Not remix, not covers, just the original, just that voice. Because sometimes one moment is enough. One moment of clarity, one honest lyric, one quiet voice reminding the world that sadness doesn't have to scream to be heard. Robert John had that moment, and in that moment, he became timeless. Brian James passed away at the age of 21. Brian James didn't leave this world quietly. And he sure as hell didn't enter it that way either. He came crashing into music like a Molotov cocktail tossed into a polite dinner party. For punk rock fans, his name doesn't just ring a bell, it smashes a guitar through one. Brian James was one of the true architects of punk, not the Instagram version, not the watered down, fast fashion, safety pin t-shirt kind. No, he was the real deal. Loud, angry, fearless. He played like he had a grudge against the strings themselves, and every riff he wrote felt like a middle finger to the establishment. If the Sex Pistols were punk's chaos, Brian James was its precision. As the guitarist and primary songwriter for The Damned, he helped release the very first British punk single, New Rose, in 1976. Long before punk was a trend or a logo, Brian was laying down its blueprint in spit, sweat, and distortion. The Damned weren't just loud, they were tight. And that was Brian's doing. His guitar work was raw but deliberate, controlled chaos. You could tell he wasn't just thrashing around. He knew exactly what he was doing. He brought structure to anarchy, and that's why their sound still holds up decades later. But Brian wasn't built to stay in one place. After 2 albums with The Damned, he moved on, forming Lords of the New Church, a dark, post-punk supergroup that mixed sleaze, sex, and cynicism into something weirdly hypnotic. While other punk bands burned out or sold out, Brian just kept evolving. He didn't care about the rules, never did. He wore leather before it was cool, played punk before it was profitable, and dropped labels before they could drop him. He was stubborn, self-destructive at times, but always honest. And that's what made him dangerous. That's what made him great. Offstage, Brian was quieter than you'd expect, still intense, but introspective. He could talk for hours about blues guitarists, obscure horror films, or conspiracy theories he half believed. But get him on the topic of music? The guy lit up. He didn't just play punk. He believed in it. He believed in what it meant: freedom, rage, truth, even if it was ugly. He didn't chase radio hits or awards. He didn't care if mainstream media ignored him. As long as the amps were on and the audience was sweating, he was good. In his mind, fame was a distraction. Music was the mission. And yeah, he had his demons. Most punks did. But even in the chaos, Brian never lost his creative spark. He kept recording, collaborating, experimenting. Until the very end, he stayed committed to the noise he helped create. When news of his death hit, the punk scene mourned like it had lost a founding father. Because it had. Underground forums lit up. Fellow musicians posted photos, set lists, old backstage stories full of madness and heart. Some younger fans didn't even know they owed their favorite riffs to him, but the real ones did. Brian James wasn't the loudest punk. He was the first. He was the spark. And even now, you can still hear his influence every time someone plugs in a guitar, cranks the volume to 11, and screams like the world's on fire. Because Brian James made sure it always would be. Bob Rivers passed away at the age of 21. Bob Rivers left behind a legacy of laughter, holiday chaos, and some of the weirdest, most brilliant radio parodies ever recorded. If you've ever heard The 12 Pains of Christmas while stuck in holiday traffic, or laughed at I Am Santa Claus, set to the tune of Iron Man, then congratulations, you've already been part of Bob Rivers' comedy kingdom. Bob wasn't just a radio guy, he was an institution. For decades he filled morning commutes with sharp humor, ridiculous songs, and the kind of wit that made you spit out your coffee if you weren't careful. He didn't just parody music, he weaponized it. No genre was safe, no artist off limits. If there was a tune you loved, Bob probably had a version that made you love it and laugh at it. He got his start in the wild world of FM radio back when DJs still had swagger and morning shows were unpredictable. In the 80s and 90s, his show became one of the most listened to and respected programs in several cities, especially Seattle, where the Bob Rivers Show became legendary. With a team of hilarious co-hosts and a production style tighter than most professional albums, Bob turned a local show into a national comedy powerhouse. And then came the Twisted Tunes. These weren't just novelty tracks. They were full-blown satirical productions with original vocals, full band arrangements, and lyrical genius. Take What If God Smoked Cannabis? Or White Trash Christmas? Or the absolutely iconic Walking Round in Women's Underwear. They were absurd, smart, catchy, and way more well-produced than they had any right to be. But the magic wasn't just in the songs, it was in Bob himself. He was a technician and a showman. Behind the mic, he was funny and fearless. Behind the scenes, he was meticulous. He treated radio like an art form, even when the art was singing about flatulence to the tune of Let It Snow. He believed comedy deserved craftsmanship, and that's what made his work endure. Bob also had a surprising emotional depth. Beneath the parody was a guy who genuinely cared about his team, his audience, and the world he made fun of. He didn't just poke fun for the sake of it. His humor was pointed, sometimes political, always purposeful. He once said, "If people are going to laugh, give them something to think about too." Listeners knew him for the laughs, but coworkers knew him for his generosity. He mentored young broadcasters, gave chances to fresh talent, and treated his crew like family. He wasn't the kind of host who hogged the mic. He elevated everyone around him. That's rare in entertainment, and even rarer in comedy. Even after retiring from daily radio, Bob stayed connected to fans. He'd release new songs online, guest host shows, and occasionally pop up with holiday specials that reminded everyone how deeply his work had woven into the culture. His fans aged with him, but the laughter stayed the same. When he passed, tributes came pouring in, not just from radio personalities, but from fans who grew up with his songs, who still played his parodies every Christmas, and who considered him the voice of their morning routines. It takes a rare kind of talent to make people laugh for decades, and Bob Rivers had it in spades. He proved that parody isn't cheap, it's an art form, and he made sure we never heard our favorite songs the same way again.